Is that a Carrera S or a GTS? When did the Gt2 come out? What's a Porsche 911? I'm sure you've either asked the question or have been asked the question about Porsche 911s. There's just a lot of them, and I can answer most of those except what is a Porsche 911 in today's video. Welcome back to Ideal Cars YouTube channel. My name is Brad Danger, and this channel is dedicated to next generation car enthusiasts, committed to living with an ideal car. If that sounds like you or someone you'd like to be, hit the subscribe button and also check out the Ideal Car Strategies, where I teach you how to buy your next attainable dream car and either drive it for free or make money on it. So check that out up there. Now, I've owned this 911 for about 18 months, and although it's not my first Porsche 911, it is my first water-cooled. The 997 generation has a lot of different models and a lot going for it. They started production in 2005 and went all the way up to 2012. And what some people don't know is that it's the last pure Porsche, which Volkswagen Group took over and started producing the 991, where the 997 was built by and sold by Porsche exclusively. So, to be debated, but I think it's the last raw 911. Now, in this video, I'm going to explain the different models that were introduced each model year, because time and time again, I get asked this exact question. I bet if you own a 997, you're tired of answering the question. What's the difference between a 2005 Carrera and a 2009 Carrera? Yes, they're both 911s, but there are a lot of similarities and differences. And one thing to note with a model year, according to the auto industry, it's a 364-day period. It runs from August 1st all the way to July 31st the next year. For example, a 2006 model would have been produced between August 1st, 2005 and July 31st, 2006. All right, let's do this. This is the first year of the 997. Before it was the 996, which, love it or hate it, was the first water-cooled 911. Now, the 997 retains the basic profile of its predecessor, but Porsche went back to the original bug-eye headlights. Keep the opinions of the teardrop headlights to yourself, and reimagined a more modern-looking interior that stole styling cues from earlier 911s. So in October of 2004, there were two versions of the 997 introduced. The first was a rear-wheel drive Carrera with the flat six 3.6 liter, pushing out 325 horsepower, and a more powerful Carrera S with a 3.8 liter, pushing out 355 horsepower. Besides the larger motor, the Carrera S also came with 19-inch wheels, larger brakes, and the iconic red calipers. Slightly lowered suspension with PASM, which stands for Porsche Active Suspension Management, which is just fancy terminology for being able to adjust your dampening settings. Xenon lights were standard, as well as a sports steering wheel. In the middle of 2005, the 997 Cabriolet was also introduced. Now, there were two transmission options, either a 6-speed manual that you got to row your own gears and the Tiptronic gearbox. Personally, I love my 6-speed manual transmission. In fact, I think it's one of the best transmissions ever built. I challenge anyone to name a better transmission that has better feel stock. The Tiptronic, on the other hand, leaves a lot to be desired. Essentially, Porsche created a unique transmission brain that monitors your driving characteristics. Then, depending on the data it receives, adapts the transmission shifting points to one of the 5 available shift maps. Don't get me wrong, some people love this transmission, and it will hold a lot of horsepower. But if in doubt, row it out. Porsche has had a history of adding all-wheel drive to their 911s, and in 2006, the 997 got the Carrera 4 and the Carrera 4S. Now, if I eye the rear end of the Carrera and the Carrera 4 next to each other, I can't tell the difference. But if you pull out the tape measure, the Carrera 4 and Carrera 4S have 1.7 of extra girth to cover the wider rear tires. Other than that, the Carrera 4 and Carrera 4S received the same motors and options as the base Carrera and Carrera S from the model year 2005. Now, what's interesting is the term Targa was actually used first in 1966 for the Porsche 911 Targa, and is a registered trademark of Porsche. It was developed in the 1960s out of fear that the Department of Transportation in the USA would completely ban convertibles, and since 1966 has been available for many generations of Porsche 911s. The Targa 4 and Targa 4S were introduced in this model year, and the main difference between this and the Coupe and Cabriolet was the dual sliding glass tops. Now, 2007 was a great year for performance 911s because 3 high-performance iterations were introduced, with the first being the 911 Turbo. The word turbo and Porsche goes together like steak and eggs. It's not just another 911, it's a turbo, and it's special. It's a 3.6 liter motor, but it's not to get confused with the 3.6 in the base Carrera. Oh no. This 3.6 was developed by the legendary Hans Mezger, who strapped 2 turbochargers to it, good for 473 horsepower. And all 997 turbos were all-wheel drive and could be ordered with either Tiptronic or a 6-speed manual. The second high-performance 911 of this model year was the Gt2 which debuted alongside the 997 turbo at the 2006 Geneva Motor Show. The engine displacement was the same as the turbo, but doesn't have any turbochargers, and it was rated at 409 horsepower. What's truly special about this car, and it's completely dreamy, is the 8,400 RPM redline. Let's listen to that for a second. Yeah, that is absolutely intoxicating. Yeah, and on top of those sounds, it was crowned as the best handling car in America by Motor Trend. Talk about a well-rounded package. And if that wasn't good enough for you, the cherry on top was the third high-performance iteration, where they already took the track-ready GT3, got 2 letters put next to it, an R and an S, which stands for Rennsport, which is German for race sport. The Gt2 Rs was built to set lap records. Almost all creature comforts were thrown out the window, a full roll cage was installed, carbon fiber seats, and it joined the big Wang Gang with an in-your-face wing added. To say the least, this was a full-fledged track car that's barely street legal. And I gotta say, 2007 was a great year for the Porsche 911. 2 things happened this year. The first was the turbo got a cabriolet, which is exciting if you like to do things topless. But what stole the show was the introduction of the GT2. Porsche took the twin turbo motor from the 911 turbo and doctored it up to create 523 horsepower. And what they didn't take from the turbo was the all-wheel drive system. So the GT2 was a rear-wheel drive layout. This baby was the most powerful and fastest road-going Porsche 911 ever. It was the first Porsche ever equipped with launch control, which made this thing blast from 0 to 60 in just 3.6 seconds. And it was the first 911 ever to exceed 200 miles per hour. Now that is what I'm talking about. Aha, now the model year 2009 is the first year of the Porsche 997.2 911. And all Porsche 911s that were made from 2005 to 2008 are considered the 997.1 or pre-facelift 997. There are some very specific styling cues to spot facelift 997.2s. You'll notice that they have slightly different headlights, taillights, larger intakes in the front bumper, and updated direct fuel injection engines. Now the base Carrera with the new 3.6 motor was putting out 345 horsepower or 10 less than the Carrera S 997.1, and the 3.8 liter was now putting out 385 horsepower out of the Carrera S. Also, Porsche finally introduced the tongue twister 7-speed automatic transmission called the Doppelgänger-Finkendangen. Yeah. Or as Americans refer to it as the PDK. This is a super quick shifting dual clutch transmission with near telepathic rev matching capabilities. Yeah, it's that good. Also, the second generation GT3 was launched with a new 3.8 liter 435 horsepower Mezger motor. And you could get any transmission you wanted with that car as long as it was a 6-speed manual. And it had the rev matching technology built into it. And while we're on the topic of driver's aids, this was the first GT3 that was available with stability control to help less experienced drivers that went beyond their limits, which personally, I'm a pretty big fan of. You gotta earn your stripes. And honestly, that stability control has probably saved a few lives and cars because the limits are so high on the GT3. Well, the turbo got a bump from a 3.6 liter to a 3.8 liter that pushed out 493 horsepower. And you can now get it with the PDK transmission instead of the Tiptronic that was offered in previous models. 0 to 60 was just 3.4 seconds away with a top speed of 194 miles an hour. And I've heard through the grapevine that one of the main reasons that this turbo was updated was because it was being benchmarked against the newly introduced GTR. Let's face it, Porsche doesn't want their flagship 911 to lose to a Nissan. Nothing against Nissan. And so Porsche decided to just hit one out of the park and created the more powerful turbo called the Turbo S. Now the S stands for sport, and it was pretty much a fully optioned 911 turbo with 30 additional horsepower. It was Porsche's fastest production car to date, and they took the Gt2 Rs one step further as well. Now with a naturally aspirated 444 horsepower, lower weight, and shorter transmission ratios, the RS holds its weight and then some all the way up to its 8,500 RPM redline. Porsche also decided to roll out an extremely limited edition 911 called the Sport Classic, which was inspired by the 1973 Carrera RS 2.7. Only 250 units were ever created, and it sold out in less than 48 hours. And with the success of that limited edition car, they stayed on track with more special edition 911s. First, they introduced the Black Edition 3.6 liter Carrera. And just like the Ford Model T, this 911 was available in any color as long as it was black. It sported Turbo 2 wheels and other extra equipment that added up to roughly $10,000. There were 1,911 Black Editions built in both coupe and cabriolet. Now, what was also introduced in this model year is probably my favorite all-around daily driver track package, which is called the GTS, which comes in above the Carrera and below the GT3 in the pecking order. It has 408 horsepower coming from the flat 6 instead of 385 from the Carrera S. Some exterior enhancements and GT3 styling in the interior with Alcantara throughout. And they also introduced the 911 Speedster, which they shared the same 408 horsepower engine as the GTS. This was also a limited edition with only 356 units built, which is actually the name of the car that I was brought home from the hospital in. But it's also the name of the car that was the precursor to the 911. And the Gt2 Rs had to make a cameo appearance in 2011 with a now iconic 493 horsepower 4-liter naturally aspirated Mezger motor. The engine is just a masterpiece, and the crankshaft is actually from a Gt3 RSR race car. Now, the car only weighed 3,000 pounds, which made this final RS an actual track weapon. And believe it or not, that wasn't even the most impressive car released by Porsche in 2011. Remember the GT2 with 530 horsepower? Yeah, what do you think they did with that? They took the GT2 and they made the GT2 RS. 612 horsepower and 150 pounds less than the standard GT2. Mind-numbing performance. And again, do away with the all-wheel drive. This was a rear-wheel drive supercar, and definitely a force to be reckoned with. Well, this was the last year of the 997 production and the beginning of the 991 production. Now, new models were introduced throughout the year, and you could either get a 997 or a 991 in 2012. As you can see, the 997 generation is definitely one of the best ever built. And like I said earlier, the last one built when it was truly Porsche and not Volkswagen Group. And I hope this video spread some clarity on the different variants, as well as when someone's talking about a 997.1 and a 997.2, you know exactly what they're talking about. Also, in the comments down below, let us know which variation of 997 is your ideal spec. You like the GTS? Would you go GT3, base Carrera? What one is yours? Also, if you love 911s, check out my ideal Porsche swag. This is one of the shirts. Click up here. Now, if you liked this video, you're going to love the video. It's actually the story of how I bought my ideal 911, where I fly down to San Francisco, buy a really rare M3, and then I drive it back up, and then I trade it for my 997. So if you want to check that out, click over here, or if you want to take a break and see what YouTube recommends you watch next, click here. If you haven't subscribed, support the channel and subscribe. But either way, you can't lose, and as always, keep living that ideal lifestyle.